and welcome back to another episode of the Data and AI podcast. My name is Noah. I'm a managing consultant here at Harnham. I look after our market research and the consumer insight team. Here at Harnham, we're dedicated to connecting top talent in data and AI to leading opportunities across the industry. Today, we're really excited to explore the topic of the consumer experience gap, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest, Abhi. Abhi is currently Chief Client Officer of Focus Insights and is truly a leader in the market research and consumer insight space. Abhi, would you like to give a quick overview of yourself and your background?
Thanks, Noah. Lovely to be here and good to connect. As a research practitioner, I've been in the research industry for about more than 25 years now, and about 20 years of that has been the Kantar business. Grown from being a research practitioner to being a consultant to being a commercial leader on the research side of things. And the idea here is to kind of identify needs and gaps for our customers and clients and make them much better for the people they're serving. So that's where how research fits into it, and that's what I kind of propagate.
That sounds great. Let's dive in. Firstly, Abhi, like you mentioned, you've been in the industry quite a long time. You're quite new to Focus Insights. It'd be great to hear a bit more about the business and how you navigate the challenges of making fact-based decisions and in this pretty fast-paced consumer world.
Obviously, after all these kind of tier one agencies which I was in, the reason why I kind of came to Focus Insights and connected to them is because it's a very bespoke research consultancy kind of solution where we kind of listen to client problems and issues before we come up with any solutions. So it's nothing connected to off-the-shelf solutions. It's more listening to them and understanding what they really need and how does it really kind of connect to business outcomes rather than just insights, and create solutions on the back of it and have those engagement and sessions with the client. So that's one of the reasons why that's what Focus Insights is all about, which is being very fast and agile and being kind of cost effective as well in terms of delivering great research and great insights to our customers and clients, but connected to kind of client empathy and the kind of business outcomes, which clients are really looking for. So connecting those dots between insights and marketing or insights and the other stakeholders. So that's what we specialize in.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're doing some really good stuff. So I guess getting into the overall topic of today, Abhi, last time we spoke, we went for a coffee in Richmond, and you obviously talked about your article, Walking the Consumer Journey, Understanding the Experience Gap. So could you share a bit about the article, your inspiration behind it, and sort of, what really motivated you to explore this topic?
One of the interesting things which I found is all these years of being in the research market and the research sector is how much money or research investment gets spent across the marketing cycle. And there's a lot of investment which is done on the kind of NPD innovation side, foresight, etc., and go-to-market pieces, which is effectively getting a brand or product ready to get into markets. And once it's in market, then it's left to measurement companies to measure market share, product share, etc. And this is more, I'm connecting it more to the CPG, FMCG kind of sector, but there's not so much of money being spent on just understanding the experience of the product, or how consumers really experience the product as it happens. And I feel that there's a kind of a gap over there, because if you don't measure what your people are experiencing, it's very difficult for you to kind of retain your customers and retain your consumers, so to say. That's what attracted me into this. A lot of people have been talking about the say-do gap. And I think the say-do gap also exists within the brand and product experience, which is why I wrote this article around the experience gap.
Right. Well, so how would you sort of define what is the experience gap then, by your definition?
Effectively, I think it is almost a situation where brands and products are probably not performing as well as the marketers or the manufacturers think they are. Effectively, they're not really looking at the consumers in terms of how they actually experience the product. The other thing is, instead of kind of companies just relying on what consumers say they want, it's better for them to start understanding what they actually do and how they feel in certain critical moments of that product experience. That's where I feel that the gap is. So it's a situation of saying where brands don't really deliver to the promise they have when they communicate or the message effectively. And so that's where the gap really sits in.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Would you be able to share then any examples, where you've come across this gap, or maybe any work that you've done around it?
I mean, there are obviously quite a few examples in terms of what people promise and what they don't deliver. And I guess the closest I can come to is possibly all the Christmas ads we've seen over the festive season. And a lot of retailers, a lot of brands putting up their comms and messaging. And some of the comms and messaging have been very successful in terms of some measurements systems that have been done by other companies where they've rated the ad saying this ad is doing really well, or that ad done really well in terms of relevance, in terms of narrative, in terms of resonance, etc. But when you actually go and visit those stores or those retailers and you see the actual experience of what really happens, then there's a certain gap. Because I remember walking to one of the retailers, which had a really cool ad. And when I walked into the store, the store experience was completely different. Shelves were all over the place. There were product samples kept all over the place. There was used packaging kept in the corners. The till machines were not working. I mean, they had till machines which were self-serve, and there was probably some kind of a technical glitch. And on the back of it, none of the till machines, self-serve machines were working, and there was a queue which started building up. And on the back of it, they're thinking, that's not really what I was looking for when I was walking into the store, because I pulled something else completely. So that's one example. And the other example which I was really thinking of was the other day I was driving into Richmond and listening to this person on the radio. And she said that she actually bought a shampoo product on the back of a testimonial from a big singer, a big artist, American artist. And obviously, as a testimonial, you believe that that kind of a personality is backing that kind of a shampoo. Is probably using the shampoo, but maybe not. But there is some kind of confidence that you get when you buy something like that. But when she used the product, it spoiled her hair completely, and it just wasn't what the brand promised, or what the brand promise was from a claims perspective. So it's almost saying, can you deliver to the claims that you're putting in? That's what struck me, saying that you say something, but maybe the consumers don't really see it. And that's what you really measure.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, I can probably think of so many examples of it's almost promises delivered by marketing and you buy these companies, which they never deliver up to it, but it maybe sort of they're looking for XYZ marketing spend and return, ROI and stuff like that. But, what is the consumer actually getting out of it? So yeah, it's super interesting to hear about. I remember one thing I really liked in the article that I thought was super interesting. You sort of suggested that traditional market research methods, they do fall short of capturing sort of true consumer behavior. So why do you feel like that is? Why do you feel like it doesn't do a great job of really understanding that?
Like I said, one is obviously not so much of investment is put onto that, or the experience gap, or the consumer experience as it stands. But whenever it is measured through traditional surveys or the way things are normally done, which what people call is rational kind of interviewing or rational kind of surveys, which I think is a great place because you can actually query and you can ask questions. But I feel there are certain places where you can also start integrating some of the online worlds, which is effectively social media or blogs, forums, reviews, etc. Start bringing it in and bringing some of the feedback in as well. Because a lot of times what happens is a fair amount of companies, and I'm not saying all of them, but majority companies treat social media listening or social media we have purely kind of as a separate module when it comes to social media, just trying to understand the reach or the impressions or sentiment, etc. But I think it's kind of the holy grail piece, which is where if you can integrate those insights into regular experience kind of work or regular research, rather than treating it as a separate module and marry these two together, that's where the reality of consumer experience can really come in. Because people are really honest in terms of what they say online, in terms of views, or where they're putting something on TikTok or Insta or anywhere else. It's the honest truth, and it's unsolicited as well. So if it's unsolicited, you know it's clean. The other thing is obviously there's a band of influencers, and these band of influencers will start impacting based on their feedback on certain products and brands. Some of them have been paid to do it, that's fine. But I believe of late there's been a trend of what we call de-influencers coming in as well. So if there's been a bad experience on a particular brand or a product, there is actually a hashtag de-influence on some of these social media sites, which is very dangerous because it can go viral, it can spread as well. So I think that these are the kind of techniques which you can start bringing into measuring consumer experience and putting another layer beyond the traditional quantitative or qualitative research that's typically being done.
Yeah, again, I think that's so interesting because when when I'm watching a TV show, even if I'm watching a football match or something, if something of note happens, I'm straight on Twitter. I'm seeing, what does everyone else think of this? And I mean, yeah, you're completely right in terms of that is so true. It's honest, it's clear, isn't it? Because there's no bias there really. I think they're just sort of putting their thoughts online, and there's obviously all sorts that could go into thinking behind the answers of a survey. Or interviews, focus groups, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think it's so true in this social media age, and it's definitely from from the roles that we work on, social listening and all these type of tools. They're still a minority in terms of the wider market research sort of spectrum. So I think it's definitely a really interesting point. Aside from focusing more on that sort of type of, is there anything else that you sort of feel like can sort of get better insights then?
I guess I'll probably come back to the experience gap kind of piece as well, because it's all about linking things one to the other. So even at research as a process is always leading to certain objectives which we send from a kind of a client brief as it happens. But I think it requires us thinking a little out of the box. So when you think of the experience gap, for example, I'm just not talking about the consumer experience or the product experience. It's basically when the consumer first experiences the brand or the product or the category, which could be sometimes when they're thinking about it, or are they doing a search around it? So are they using a search engine to start looking at certain features or aspects of the product? Secondly, when they interact with it in store or online. So they might be doing it on an online site, or they might be doing it in store in a certain retailer. So what's the feeling and what's the interaction experience they get in that store? The third is once they buy it, how are they actually consuming it? They're consuming it. I'm talking about saying are they dispensing it correctly? Does it taste, flavor correct? Is overall sensory experience fine? So all that put together. Normally what happens is we just treat these as individual kind of modules or kind of individual pieces of building blocks of experience. But the idea is to kind of bring this entire story, kind of manage it together, saying what it really believes. So I think this is one of the key things. And obviously we mentioned the social media side of things with feedback. And that's where I guess some of the AI conversation starts coming in as well, in terms of how AI can be applied to some of these learnings or some of the big data sets which typically come in. So I guess that is, I think, will probably lead us into some conversation around the AI side and how AI plays a role.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could talk for hours about the AI stuff. I've got one more question just for you on the article. I'll be before we get into that. But I think the listeners will be interested to know, what are the consequences for the brands that, fail to address this gap? Sort of what are they missing out on, and what could they be leading to?
I think there's one very critical aspect to missing out if there's an experience gap. First is, I think from a branding perspective or marketing perspective, when you're messaging or you're doing the comms, whether it's happening digitally or whether it's saturation, you can get consumers try your brand. I mean, it's great because that's what creates trial. That's what kind of creates the first purchase as it happens. But if you're not able to deliver on your promise in terms of the experience of the brand, it starts impacting the repeat purchase. And repeat purchase, in other words, is an element of loyalty. And if you're not able to create those loyal consumers, so you're not creating an ongoing purchase for your brand, so it might start impacting some of your revenue or some of your share kind of an aspect which you can kind of getting measured on as well. So I think that's probably the critical part, which I feel is where the impact can felt the most in terms of not understanding what that experience gets. Some companies do it really well. I mean, they understand the consumer, they deliver to that experience, they deliver to the promise as well. And there are some pretty good examples of that in terms of how that works. I can think of some very good kind of dairy manufacturers who do that and get some good customer experience, consumer experience in the back of it. And I guess connected to this is a lot of experience or consumer experience is normally people define as CX. And CX is normally seen in the customer experience in the services world, which is say the B2B2C or B2B kind of world. But here my reference point is more the B2C or the consumer FMCG, CPG kind of world, where we talk about experience. And some people tend to term this as UX, which is user experience. And UX is normally seen as more online digital experience. And that's a separate piece, and that's a separate vertical altogether. Here, this is more about me as a consumer. How do I feel? And therefore, how do I act?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting to hear. I mean, I think I think you're bang on in terms of you can do all these different sort of flashy marketing displays to get someone in the door, but sort of real customer loyalty is what what brands want. So and yeah, if they are failing to address that, that's what they're missing out on. So yeah, I definitely recommend any listeners to read Abhi's article. It's super interesting, really good read. But I guess moving on then, Abhi, like you alluded to a couple of minutes ago, the biggest buzzword potentially in the world right now is AI, ChatGPT, so on and so forth. And I've had a couple of conversations recently around sort of AI market research. So from your side of things, how is AI being utilized at the moment, and sort of where do you feel like the strengths are for it, and then where do you feel like it's limited?
That's a really great question because I've come out from a place where spending last 25 years in research where there was absolutely nothing connected to AI when we first started coming to this world. So the pace of change has been really quick in terms of over the last 5 to 7 to 10 years, in terms of the AI coming in, which then getting converted into Gen AI and all the ChatGPT models which typically exist. And I think it's a great thing for our sector to have this in terms because to me, it takes care of what we call the heavy lifting, which typically as a process, we would normally get bogged down by. So that's a great application in terms of taking care of all the data intelligence side of things, the data structure, the data lakes, which typically get formed on the back of research, and also learning certain sentiment kind of pieces, which on the basis of surveys being done, so all that get fed into the AI machine. Obviously, it's very critical to understand what kind of training data has been provided to the AI machine as well, because your AI is as good as what the training data has been given. Some companies are great at it, some companies are still learning, trying to get there. But I think my biggest feel is, end of the day, since we're talking and working with our clients who are typically FMCG companies or CPG companies, and speaking to insight leaders or marketing leaders there, we have to keep those insights connected to business and to the business outcomes. Very often I've seen across organizations that researchers tend to stay within the project lanes and stay within that lane itself. And they really don't feel it their accountability or responsibility to go beyond that and start giving recommendations or insights which are really business oriented or business impactful or impactful to the business. And I feel, based on my conversations the last few years, that's kind of the small bugbear which some of our client users have, which is, can my research agency really help me connect those dots to my business stakeholders or business need, rather than just a research or insight need, typically, which happens. So ultimately go into the outcomes or the afters of what happens after this research. And to me, that's why AI, I don't think, can really impact it. That's where the human intelligence or the human brain can really have an impact. So AI can take you in terms of getting you to, making your process easier, making your scaling up easier, making your intelligence easier from a data insights perspective and intelligence perspective, getting all the sentiments right, getting the cultural analysis right, etc. But to turn it into business reality is effectively, we as researchers are really important and powerful. Because we know that relationship with the client, we know the client's relationship with the internal stakeholder, and that it's a chain. So I don't think the AI, because it's a fact-driven piece, it probably doesn't get that human chain. So that's where the other humans are really important.
Yeah, I mean, I saw an interesting, just a post about AI a while ago, and it said, I don't want AI to draw my pictures or write my songs. I want them to wash my dishes and fold my clothes so I can do the creative stuff, right? So, I mean that's where it comes into play here. The agencies are getting paid to find and connect the dots between customers and the brands. AI can't do that. They can maybe make life easier, but they can't make those connections, So I mean that's a really interesting point. I guess linked to that then, Abhi, when you're using AI, sort of how would you ensure that human insight sort of still remains really central when it comes to interpreting these outputs and maintaining that sort of client empathy?
So I guess, once obviously what we do at, say, Focus Insight is we listen to the client, and so we know what the brief is, we know what the client outcome is. On the back of it, we build up the research, for example. Now, even if we're using some AI technologies in terms of data gathering or data consolidation, but that's fine. But because we know that the AI machine is good, it works and it does well for us. But once the data comes out, and obviously data comes out in form of tables or whatever form that does come in, it is for us to put that color into it, or put that creative element. Because I always feel, ever since I started the research sector, is research is all about curiosity. You need to be curious to be a researcher. And even if the AI outputs are giving you certain reads or certain learnings, can you ask the question again and saying, what does that really mean? Or what is the real intent behind this? And how does it really make a difference for my client's life, the person I'm working with? Then it's not just about clever stuff coming out from the AI machine. It's that clever stuff connected. And I go back to this entire thing about storytelling. And storytelling it's been that this term of storytelling has been around for the last few years, and people talk about storytelling as well. But I feel that it's kind of much used and abused the way it's happening. Because it's almost a similar situation as when you pick up a book to read. And every book has a story. The story has to connect to you. And only if you keep connection on, then you go on to read the book. But maybe in the first 20 pages, you don't connect with it. Then you kind of leave the book aside and pick up another book. But that book still had a story. So to me, it's not about just the story. It's how the story links and connects and resonates with the person who's reading it, which is, in this case, our client. And for that, we need to understand that client need. And that's where the empathy angle is. You have to go a level beyond storytelling. Tell your story, but keep it meaningful. Connect it.
Yeah. I think that's how we're really going to maximize things, isn't it? But I think we're really scratching the surface of it. So I think, we could be having a different conversation in in 5 years' time around how to utilize it, and even 1 year's time, with how quickly things are changing. But yeah, super, super interesting topic. Just wanted to close things out then, I'll be around sort of obviously market research hiring is where sort of what I specialize in. And always have quite interesting conversations around when hiring for these types of roles. There's always quite sometimes a trade-off between sort of technical expertise. So be it your survey design, moderating focus groups, stuff like that. And then your client empathy in terms of, how really deeply can candidates connect to clients, because it's hard to quantify, but you definitely have a gut feel about it. What do you prioritize when you're sort of looking at potential new hires?
Well, I guess from my perspective, the way I look at it is, depending on the level of what the person, you do expect some element of craft skill to have been with that person, especially being a researcher, is you do develop certain skills connected to the job or the craft as you're kind of growing up in your career. So at a certain level, you expect that kind of craft skill to remain. Yes, you can take a leap of faith because you're saying, okay, there's certain skills where that person may or may not have, but that can be developed over time. But that development, I would probably see as more like a soft skill where there's intent to learn. So a lot of my focus is on ability and intent as well, and attitudes. So once the craft skill is kind of taken for granted, that yes, if somebody is applying for that position, they have the basic aspects of that craft skill. For me, what I look at is more in terms of, are they able to pick up that information, and are they willing to connect it to the business? Again, I go back to that entire thing. So are they willing to go above and beyond the call of duty, so to say, or the role of a typical researcher as it happens, and go and say, I have the confidence of telling this client that this is what my recommendation should be taken on as. Because one of the things I've seen very often with researchers is, especially with being at the tier one companies also, is it's very easy to give a recommendation to a client saying, you need to change this on your pack, or you need to change the color of this, or the branding on this. But researchers don't really understand the implication, the kind of cost implication of doing a certain recommendation. So for example, if I'm asking somebody to change a certain pack design on a site-based recommendation in a report, they need to probably go back into the manufacturing cycle and do that. So there's CapEx involved over there. So they need to change their process flow in terms of their machinery or their certain process, etc. But obviously as researchers, that's not our remit, right? So we don't really think about that. But that's where I feel that as some of our recommendations impact those cycles, the process cycles or manufacturing cycles. So we have to start thinking about those side of things as well. So when I look at hiring, then I'm also looking at people who are going into that level of thinking. They're not getting stuck into just research process. Okay, what kind of methodology should we be adopting? That is important for sure, because that ensures the robustness of your research. But I'm also looking at people who are linking it to business and business impact on the other side. So that's that. I keep it very simple. It's that kind of person. But it's, having said that, not everybody is built in a similar way. Then you can inculcate that, or you can train that, or you can influence that people to think that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always going to be the best of both, isn't it? If someone has got that expert level of technical skills, and then they can really dig deep with the clients and their insight recommendations, while sort of considering the implications sort of for them as well. I mean, that they're going to be the superstars, I think, aren't they? Sort of alongside this, Abhi, when you've sort of hired in the past, obviously specifically for these market research roles, what sort of struggles have you had?
I guess for some of the struggles, I wouldn't say there've been too many, but I guess one of the biggest things is, again, people getting bogged down with the research process. And because that's what they've been used to, or that's what they've been trained with. So one of the big things is about, growing in the role which you're in. So having that ambition to grow. So if you're coming in for a job interview, for example, it should be a growth from what you're doing in the existing position, so to say. And so that's one of my kind of, I wouldn't say it's not a kind of a big problem as such, but I would say maybe people need to start looking bigger than what they actually are. So get it to the next level and take it, in terms of a career progression. But by and large, I would say just go beyond the research process. So because that's a given. It's almost like saying in a football team, for example, the coach or the manager doesn't teach them how to play football. All of them know they're footballers, so they don't play football as a skill. It's all about the strategics and strategy and tactics. Typically, that's what the coach and manager does, as compared, when you have an opposing team in front of you. So that's what I'm looking at is, like I said, technical skills are there, but can we look at going beyond those technical skills and getting into some element of connectivity with the client.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a certain point, and everyone can do the basics, can't they? But it's sort of looking through that and sort of what can they add, and what's different about them. Because yeah, you'll if you hire for XYZ certain level, they will all be able to do what you want. But sort of who can go the next level, I think it is where people really stand out, isn't it?
Correct. And I guess suppose we, from a hiring perspective, if there's a kind of a job profile out there, say for example there are 4 people in the mix, I guess, and all of them have the technical and craft skill on the CV. But what I will probably look for in that case is which are the ones which stand out in terms of attitude and intent. I guess that's the biggest thing.
How would you say someone can sort of show that just through a CV, for example?
I guess that will be through maybe examples or evidence of the work which is being done. And let's say examples and evidence, not just of the work, but the impact that work has had with the people they've been working for or the client they've been working for. And when I say impact is what has a client or the company actually done on the back of, say, insights or recommendations which have been given, which have been impactful. So have they, I mean, it's quite extreme, but have they grown market share by 2%? Have they increasing that? Because these are facts. These are ROI metrics, but it's not always easy to get the ROI metric. But even if somebody says on the back of the work I've done, they've gone into a new campaign, or they've changed the campaign, or something like that, or they've changed some product design, package design. So what has been the business impact? That will be really helpful to know on a CV.
Definitely. I think market researchers can sometimes be a bit coy about that, I think they, but yeah, they definitely sort of need to scream and shout about it. It's the work that the research industry does as a whole is massive, isn't it? So if you have, increased market share by even 1%, that's a great outcome, isn't it? And it really is a good sort of tool to help you stand out from the masses, when you are looking for something new. So yeah, that's definitely something I recommend. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for this morning, Abhi. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation. And obviously, I'm very passionate, as you can see, about this experience gap side of things. So I'm glad that message goes across and goes to a number of people. And really, thanks to you, Noah, and all the people at Harnham as well to get this to make this possible. And happy to go to the kind of analytics pillar.
Oh, very, very welcome. I hope you and obviously the viewers enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. We have loads more episodes coming featuring data and AI leaders across the industry. For more information about Harnham, please visit our website at harnham.com. And you can also find our podcast episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, take care.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, brought to you by the Harnham Group. We'd love it if you would share the podcast on social media and leave a comment or a review to help us reach a bigger audience. If your company is having difficulty finding skilled data professionals, you can rely on the global leader in data and analytics recruitment, staffing and talent development to assist you with your hiring needs. Find out more at www.harnham.com. Thank you for listening.